and welcome to my podcast on real relationships. My name is Sophie Passon, and I am a relationship expert, international speaker, and best-selling author of a book, Your Other Half. I decided to start this podcast because, in my opinion, relationships are currently not being portrayed as what they really are. Whether you're watching the news, social media, TV, the perception given to people is wrong. And my aim is to talk about what happens in the real world, talk about real stories, and listen to what real people think, do, or go through, as opposed to creating expectations of something that doesn't actually exist. I may not agree with everything that is said by my guests, but it is their chance to express their opinions and their stories. And here today, we are going to talk about adversity with Evelyne Brink. Hi, Evelyne. How are you?
Hello, Sophie. I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
So my name is Evelyne Brink. I work as a transformational coach and an expert in executive presence. That means I work with leaders to help them be more authentic on camera, and with creative entrepreneurs, how to keep their integrity as their success is growing. That's my professional.
Yeah.
But as a person, I am a very artistic soul. So I have a background in performance. I write songs, I write poems, I've written books. I express myself on multiple levels. I love being on stage. I've once been known as Europe's #1 Madonna impersonator. I've done stand-up comedy. I'm German. So humor is obviously a natural thing. And I have 2 children. Yeah. Both of them were born with health complications, to put it mildly. Yeah. I run a mini hospital from home. I'm a single parent and a carer / nurse to my son. And I love life.
So adversity, to you, what is adversity?
Adversity to me is the idea that things are not going to plan, are not going to expectation, are not going to this idea that we tend to have as humans, that life should be easy and happy at all times. So adversity is when it's not easy and happy at all times, but you hit the dark spots, you hit when the shit hits the fan, that's adversity.
And I think sometimes, we can have a little bit of adversity, but there seems to be a tendency that when it happens, it's not just one thing, and just keep on coming for a little while, doesn't it?
There is that, yes. And one of the areas that I like to address in coaching is how to thrive through and with adversity. Because in coaching, there's often a lot of happy, clappy talk. And I personally lead a life where there's quite a lot of intensity. I spend a lot of time in hospital. I have a child who was told wouldn't live when it came out, and that was after a miscarriage. And I run, like as I just said, a mini hospital. Like there is some proper intensity and drama in my house and life on a semi-regular basis. So the coaching that I conduct is based on real life. And I'm also really interested in real life. And that means when it's also not necessarily easy. However, life can be beautiful and easy and flowing. Yeah. And it's not linked to what's happening. And so that's also an interesting thing for me. Adversity does not mean that you are not feeling great. I've had some of my most conscious, most flowing, most elevated moments in hospital, in the intensive care unit. So it's very interesting. Adversity and thriving are really beautiful concepts that are not actually opposed, but very potent to look at.
Explain to people a little bit about what happened with your kids.
So with my children, and my oldest son is now 11, and when he was born, we were told that he wasn't going to live. So that we knew something was up when he was forming, and that was already quite intense and actually really hard, because I was so happy to be pregnant. I was so excited to become a mom. And then I was told there's something not quite right, but we didn't really know what it was. And then in week 32 or 34, they said it's 3 options. Number 1, it's a bowel occlusion. Number 2, cystic fibrosis. Number 3, Down syndrome. And I said, number 4, you got it wrong. And they said, okay, yeah, whatever. And then I thought, well, hopefully it's just a bowel occlusion, because surely you can just operate and put it together and then he's fine. My wish was granted. It was a bowel occlusion. It was not Downs. It was not cystic fibrosis, but it was the worst that I've ever seen in St. Thomas Hospital to date. And so when he was born, he was put on the operating table at around 4 hours old and operated on. After that, we were put in a quiet room, and the surgeons looked on the floor and said, well, we've never seen anything like this. He's just got no bowel left. It was all a big mess. We took everything out that was dead. and we might be left with 10 centimeters of duodenum. We formed, and then they started talking all sorts of things that probably you, as the wonderful listener hearing this for the first time, won't understand either. It's just like blah, 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 really bad, really bad. So that's how it started out. I remember saying, is there no hope? And then we had this really beautiful conversation about what is hope? What is hope? And they said, well, you can never guarantee a result. So you cannot say it's going to be 100% great. Therefore, you can never say that there's absolutely no hope, but
it's going to be 100% bad.
Right? We can't say that, but we don't want to give you any false hope, which I thought was a fascinating idea. The false hope, like the hope is to believe in something and to hope that it's going to happen, but you don't know. So what is false hope? It's so funny. Anyway, that was the first day of being a mother. Then there was a weekend where nothing happened except tears. And then on Monday, the specialist for small intestines and intestinal failure came in and said, well, actually, you could live on intravenous nutrition, feed him straight into the bloodstream. People do live like this nowadays. Medicine has advanced. People live a life on that. Comes with risks, of course, and it's a lot of cares, and one of you will never work again. Guess who we looked at?
Obviously.
Right? Not my partner. And so the decision had to be made whether that was something I wanted to do. It was a simple decision for me, of course. I didn't want to take that on. If you had the chance of a good life, I wanted to do that. And that was the beginning of motherhood. So we lived in hospital for, well, they thought 2 to 4 years would be the best scenario. Turned out it was only 8 months. Only 8 months. So a question of framing, right? And then I took him home and I look after him at home. I have learned to do all the intravenous cares. I look after him and I need to monitor his health. And if something's up, then get him into hospital very quickly. Because if you have a line that goes straight into your heart and bacteria is introduced, we're talking sepsis.
Very quickly.
Starts at the heart, not goes, it starts at the heart. So it's very high urgency if something's not quite right. That's my son. My daughter, 3.5 years later, was born with heart failure, which we didn't know about.
Right. So that was, inverted brackets, a surprise.
Yeah. The idea was, let's have another child. And surely that'll be healthy, because what are the odds, right? What are the odds? There was drama even actually at the pregnancy, because I got the results you get for the Downs test. They said 21% chances of Downs. And if you have a child that has something that's like 1 in a more million, got something, 21% to me was like, it's got guaranteed Downs. What am I going to do? So I did all the tests in the world to figure out whether she did have Downs or not, because I needed to figure out what I would do if she did, given that I already had a high complex needs child on my hands.
How old were you as well when you had them?
I was 35 with him and 38, 39 with her.
Which is classed as a geriatric mother anyway.
Oh, yeah, very old. Yeah, very. I
think anyone over 25 is a geriatric mother's nowadays. But...
So funny, isn't it? They say such funny things. They said to me about my daughter, they said, she's very small. And to which I had 2 things to say. Number 1, have you seen me? Because I'm tiny, I'm petite. And number 2, do you know the hole it comes out of, that baby? No matter how small they are, it's big enough.
It's gonna hurt.
So she came out and it turns out that she had 4 heart defects and heart failure. And that was a whole other intense story. #adversity. Yes, she survived. And first they said that she was going to have open heart surgery. And then in the end, she had no surgery at all. And I took her back out of hospital after a month. And then I gave her medicines 10 times a day that I had to mix up as well. And I fed her through a tube, through her nose, every 3 hours, 24 hours a day from the milk that I expressed in my spare time in between, on top of doing my son's medical cares, which are already a full-time job. So I think that qualifies me somewhat to speak adversity, resilience, and capacity.
So when all of this is going on, because obviously we're all human, aren't we? And even when we can see how we can cope and all the rest of it, there are bad days. How did it make you feel at times? Were you like, oh, it's not fair? I mean, was there any of that? Was there any sort of like, what am I going to do? What are they going to do when they're older? All of these questions that must at some point come through your mind.
Yeah, they would if you're not completely, I don't know. So yes, I am very human and I probably entertained every question you can think of at some point or another. there is something very beautiful about being actually busy, and that is that you do the thing that needs to be done.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one. So most of your worries occurs when you've got enough time for them.
Yeah.
When you actually have to do the work, you have less time to think. And that's why it's so healthy to do high intensity sports. Like I remember there's someone saying who had a very active brain, when I play football, my thinking stops because all I concentrate on is the ball. And that creates a space in the mind that creates well-being in the body. So I was very busy.
I think it's like anything, isn't it? It's quite literally, if you have a focus, you haven't got the time to think about other things.
So it's an advantage, right? There are perks. And there are quiet times. And yes, I have thought about everything. So how did it make me feel? It depends on the moment of the day and the time and everything. But I, contrary to what most people would assume, have felt quite good quite a lot of the time.
But I think it's also important to highlight that, you know, you did have these moments where it's not so easy, because I know that having had a little bit of adversity in my life myself, there are times where you are down in the dumps, but you've got to accept that actually it is being human and we can't be superwoman all the time.
So there is a difference for me between the adversity, that what's happening in your life, and how you are mentally. So sometimes life can get really, I'm going to call it intense. But if I'm mentally buoyant, I can handle that intensity really well. And sometimes life, regardless of how intense it is, if your mental buoyancy and your mental flexibility is compromised and you become more rigid in your mind, in your consciousness, and the frequency lowers, then everything is harder. When you meet adversity, hard circumstance, so-called hard circumstances, with a rigid state of mind or a lower frequency state of mind, this is when it really sucks. This is when it's really, really, really hard. What I would explain to be human as is that mental piece keeps changing all the time, and then the how life is also changes all the time, and that to me is the human experience. So both, it's really important for me to talk about and to realize that both have been and are present. And it's really important. You can see that from different angles. It's important because it's true, and it's important because it helps you cope, if you want to use those words. But the word coping presumes a hardship that you have to endure. It presumes the normative of the suffering, which at this point in my life, I'm at a quite buoyant state, as you can probably see and feel, where I can see that that's not the norm. It's just a way of being. And I have full compassion for when I am in that way of being, but it's not my home. It's not your home. Humans are not at home in depression. They're not at home in hardship, but we experience hardship sometimes. So there.
Yeah, and I agree. I think whenever at times I felt that, right, I need to actually feel the pain here. And I would allow myself to have the day as being down in the dumps, but not to live there. But in order to not live there, because I don't believe in what I class false positivity, you know, all these affirmations. I think that if you're saying, I don't know, to yourself, everything is great, when you're really not feeling it, I think you're making it worse because it's not congruent. And sometimes you've got to like actually accept that, no, not everything is great right now. But I also, like, so recently I've had a little bit of a mother issue, and what I've found is that as much as I wanted to confront it, because it was one of those where it was going to have to be face on and it wasn't going to be her coming forward, but I also found that actually I needed a bit of time to process, because if I wanted to actually get a result that is, inverted brackets, successful for everyone, I needed to approach it in the right way. And I find that sometimes with adversity, it's easy to just think, right, I'm just going to sort it out now. And actually, no, sometimes you do have to retreat a little bit. It's a bit like war. And I know that's not the language that we want to use, but sometimes you do have to retreat in order to advance.
Yeah, absolutely. Or you have to surrender in order to
win,
have things develop.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm a quite ambitious person and creature. And I was told that I would spend the next 2 to 4 years in hospital, day in, day out. I mean, that is a bit of a blow.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the idea was I was this glamorous former Madonna impersonator that stepped into full-time coaching. And now I have this child, and I really show people how to live this amazing life and be mother and have fun. And the next thing I know is I've got a kid that, if it's not dying, is going to live with a life-limiting condition. I mean, that sucks, right? That's how on earth would you do with that?
Yeah.
So the part of me that's ambitious and wants to make plans and wants to do stuff was cancelled. It's like, sorry, you just don't apply. If I couldn't cancel that part for the moment, or put it on hold, or whatever you want to call that, I would have been really suffering. I guess I'm fortunate that I have a gift of presence. So that means I can really drop into a situation and adapt really quickly. It's a gift developed from hardship as a child, but it serves you well in these sort of situations. So I was able to accept that my life now takes place in hospital very quickly, which has probably been disturbing to people who aren't like that. And like, how can you just, but I can literally just accept this is my life now. Now, what do I do?
Do you think there's an element of like, well, acceptance, I suppose, is the best way of putting it, where if you're quite pragmatic and you're like, right, okay, this is the situation in hand.
Yeah.
And if I want to make it better, whatever, this is what needs to happen.
Yeah.
And I think some people may not. Maybe it is, because one of the things I had was like, is it nature or is it nurture or is it a bit of both?
And who cares?
Experiences
right?
we've had.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's both, and I think a little bit, and who cares? Because if I'm working with a client, it doesn't matter whether they have it or not. All that matters is, do you need that now?
Yeah.
Do you want to work on that? Like, should we look at this? And yeah, I have it because I had a lot of situation as a kid where I needed to readapt.
Yeah.
Where either we moved house and my parents got divorced, and suddenly I was with a single mom. We didn't have much money, and you just adapt to all these situations. And I became an exchange student at the age of 15, so I lived in America as a German. I've been thrown, and I threw myself into situations that were unknown, and then adapted to them. And I find that really pleasurable, actually. That might be my personality, but again, who cares? The only thing I can say is it did serve me well in that situation. We call that luck. Okay, so I'm in hospital and I'm able to adapt to the fact that this is now my life. Does that mean that I have no day where I think, fuck, is this all there's to it? No, it doesn't mean that. Of course, I can go there, but I tend to go there less than the person that's attached to the former life.
Yeah.
I don't hang out in that painful space that much because I don't like pain.
Yeah.
So I go to where it doesn't hurt. And this is something I learned really, really well because I was in the situation, right? I talk about executive presence, and that means also presence. And I have cultivated presence by sitting still for 8 hours a day on 1 square meter for 8 months.
Yeah.
Some people go to a monastery. I was in St. Thomas Hospital in the neonatal unit. That was my monastery. But if you sit on the same spot, more or less, for 8 hours a day, and there isn't much stimulation, there isn't much, you either go crazy or you get really serene. That's your choice.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I go with option 2, given that I knew that there was a choice. So, whatever. Anyway, it served me well that I did that. But it's a moment by moment choice, because your mind either goes, oh, or it goes, and here I am, and breathe. So this, just slow the thoughts down and see what's possible. And so I was actually the first person ever to take a child out of the neonatal unit and go home for a bit and then come back. It's never been done before. And so I challenged them with this question of, hey, do you think my child could experience air on their face? And they're like, well, right now that's not possible because A, B, C, D. Okay, when would it be possible? What are the criteria? And so we developed that together and then made a plan. And it was a very interesting journey to create the impossible. And also remember, I said he's the first known survivor of having this condition to that degree. So there were quite a few things that we sat together and created and tried out and experienced and experimented on. So it was interesting. You can put your mind to good use when you are present. If I was busy worrying about how long is he going to live, what are we going to do, how are we ever going to make money again, I wouldn't have had the capacity to think about the things that would be miraculous in the now.
But I think someone who potentially would be going through something similar would be like, okay, how do I do that?
How you do that, practically speaking, you breathe and you accept the situation. You go like, okay, this is what it is. Okay. And then list all the things out. Like in my case, here I am sitting in hospital. My son is wired up on cables. I cannot move. What I have is a few hours with him when he's awake and the doctors aren't handling him. What I want is to breastfeed, but I can't because he doesn't even have an intestine. And here we are. So you can list out very practically what's going on and then accept.
I was going to say, I think it's the acceptance that's key.
And I'm going to now challenge that and move it forward, because here's the thing, and this is where I get excited. So there is acceptance, and then there is vision. And I'm a vision person. I live in possibility. So vision is where you go, but what would I love to happen? Like, what would I really want to do? How would it be amazing? So what would be amazing is if I could breastfeed. And I've heard they say it's not possible because he doesn't have an intestine, there's nowhere for the milk to go, and it could even be dangerous. But I would love if it were.
Yeah.
I would also love to be outside with my child having coffees like all the other mummies. Isn't that why you become a mum? So you can go out and have coffees with other women and love life. I would love to go out and have coffee. Those simple, beautiful things. That's what I would love. And of course, I would love to live at home. So that's what I'm seeing as vision. My vision is we're at home, I'm breastfeeding, we do all these things, we have lattes in the park, and I'm glamorous.
But I still think you can't have that unless you have the acceptance sort of thing.
And that is the difference between vision and delusion. And I found this out because I did think a lot about this, Sophie.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Because I've seen how people look at me, and I had to question myself whether I'm like just a delusional mum who sees things differently because she can't handle the truth, or whether I might be this thing who has vision, who sees possibility where other people don't. The line that I see as true is the delusional doesn't see the reality and can't accept the reality. The delusional is disconnected from what is. Happening. The visionary sees exactly what is, but says, and I'm going to hang out over here, people. Okay. I was very clear. I understood in what situation I was. I've heard it. Okay. I've taken it in. Can't, not possible, ain't happening. Wouldn't it be great if it could, though?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great if we could? I wonder how we could, though. And I just won't stop until I start creating some of those elements. For example, my desire to be glamorous, I can start that in hospital.
Yeah.
I looked great. My desire to breastfeed, I expressed my milk. So I had milk. And I've seen the looks on people's faces. Why are you keeping your milk going, Evelyne? Like, you really don't need it. And I thought, well, you never know, though. What if I can?
Yeah.
And in the meantime, what else can I do with this milk? Because it turns out, ironically, as life has it, the mother who can't breastfeed her child has a lot of milk, right? Opposite to the mother who really wants to give that child milk and they don't have any. I have milk. So I walked over to there's something called the breastfeeding donation bank. And I said, can I donate my milk then? Can I help other people who don't have the milk? Can I feed another baby?
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, you can. You have to get this shot and this and blah, blah, blah. So I pumped my milk day and night. And actually 5 weeks in, my son did so well that the doctor said, you know what, it's really good for a child to have this sucking.
Yeah.
And the closeness to the mother. It's going to be good for his development, his brain. Maybe the odd drop might help. You never know. For the stuff that's there, it helps to grow the little gut we have on the bottom, blah, blah, blah. Maybe we could do a sort of faux feed on an empty breast. What do you think? And I'm like, yeah, I really want that.
Yeah.
So after 5 weeks, my son had the opportunity for the first time to get mummy's nipple in his mouth. And then it was a question whether he would even want it or whether it's just a weird thing by that time. And I don't know if you can imagine the hoo-ha that was. The breastfeeding supporters in the hospital were super excited. The nurses, like, it's an experiment because you don't have that as a situation where a child doesn't get breast for 5 weeks and then gets breast.
Yeah.
It just has not been done. So nobody knew what was going to happen. And anyway, can you believe it? They said impossible. And suddenly they say, oh, you could try maybe a little bit. And I'm like, hey. So that happened. People were crying on the ward. It worked really well. Amazing that we could do that. And he loved it for quite a while until he didn't. Anyway, so vision is to hang out in possibility and then bring it in as and when. So the breastfeeding happened. The glamour did happen. The going home did happen eventually. The sun on his face did happen. Even him being alive and thriving is happening.
You know, as you're talking, the reason why for me acceptance is so key is one of the things that happened was like 3.5 years ago. I don't even remember whether I told you when we originally chatted. I went to see my parents. I hadn't gone for Christmas, but I just put this date out thin air and said I'm going then. So my mum at the time had had cancer for about a year and she'd been on quite heavy chemo. It was about once a week. Anyway, just went to see them. And on the Sunday morning, needed to go and wake up my dad because he was taking his time a little bit. And he was dead. And I think that's where, for me, in terms of the adversity and the acceptance, and it's a really weird thing because I'm not entirely sure. I've said all along, I haven't grieved yet. It's 3.5 years on. And I don't actually think I haven't grieved yet. I think it happened there and then. Finding a dead body that has been dead for a good 10 to 12 hours. I'm not a doctor, but, it was quite obvious. And I could see from the reaction of my mother that I had to take charge, even though there was obviously this rush of adrenaline, and this was in France. It's not 999 during emergency services. What's the fucking number? I've been in France for like 20 years. What's the fucking number you ring? I don't know. And there's that kind of rush that you need to do it now. There's nothing we could do. There was that kind of rush. And I think that I accepted there and then, to a degree, there was no vision to be had. This was a thing, and he was going to have to be dealt with, and the future was going to be very different. What that looked like, I had no idea. And at that point, it was more around making sure everybody's okay, sort of thing. So yeah, I totally agree with the vision side of things in some circumstances, because when I had, for instance, within a very short period of time, I had a number of things that happened. And with that, yes, the vision was what was needed to pull me through. But with the father situation, it was more of a, fuck, what happens now?
Yeah. So the distinction here is time.
Yeah.
In an acute emergency situation, we are not visioning. We are acting and responding.
Or collapsing, because looking at the mother, I'm glad I was there.
Yeah, or collapsing. Good point. And it's not a given, right? This is the thing, that life throws these things at us, and we get to see how we get on with it, right? So visioning is what you do when you have a bit of time, not in an emergency situation. And in an emergency situation, ideally, you breathe, you calm, you become really pragmatic, and you sort shit out.
Yeah.
That's it. And if you can do that, you're a hero. And if you can't, then then it's just how it is in that moment, and you have to deal with that. There's some situations we just don't. I remember there was one time where my son's line broke. So he's got this line into the heart, and it comes out of the chest. And it had been ruptured. They had fixed it in hospital, so they glued it together. And in that night, when the TP and the intravenous nutrition was flowing through, there was too much pressure on it, and it
popped.
Yeah, off. Now I'm sleeping. Imagine waking up, you look at your child, and there's blood all over their chest.
Yeah.
Was my thought about a vision? Of course not.
Yeah.
Was my thought clear, calm, and precise, like, oh, I'm going to take 3 serene breaths and now do the right thing? No, my thought was, oh, fuck, that's it. He's going to die.
Yeah.
Honestly, that was my thought. And in that moment, my partner, later husband, now ex-husband, came in, saw that, and said, we need to call the ambulance and the hospital. And I thought, yes, that's right. But I'm busy panicking right now.
Yeah.
So that's also human, right? Sometimes I can't say that every time I just do the right thing because I'm so calm. At that moment, I wasn't.
Yeah.
He did the right thing. And so your mum, when she saw her husband dead, wasn't in a position where she could respond appropriately. She reacted, and that she went into her freeze. It's being human. It's not always going to be great.
But I think we just don't know sometimes how we're going to react. A friend of mine was saying some time ago, she's Italian, and I can't exactly remember the ins and outs, but she lived in a flat. She went into the kitchen, she opened the door, and the kitchen was on fire. Like proper, not something you're going to be able to extinguish. You need to shut the door and run. And she could not run. She was stuck. She was frozen and paralyzed. And I can't even remember. I think someone dragged her or wherever it was.
Well, there are stress responses, and they are fight, flight, and freeze.
Yeah.
And it's going to be one of those that happens. And sometimes we're unlucky and it's the wrong one that happens. So that's part of life.
So one of the things you mentioned earlier was how in adversity you can still thrive.
Yes.
And it's not just about the vision, anticipate. There's more to it than that.
Yes, a lot more to it. Yeah, it's never quite so simple. It's complex, right? Life is complex, and some things are simple. So what is thriving? For me, it's that you have the feeling that you're growing, you're well in yourself. That can happen at any point, adversity or not. Thriving is not just when everything is easy. Thriving is when you're well inside and you can really feel this flow of life. And I think adversity is a great opportunity for growth. I mean, what better opportunity for growth if not adversity? So I noticed myself that when I had this hospital experience, I was on the bus one day and I thought, this is just crazy because I'm feeling so good. And I'm sure that's isn't that wrong that I feel good when my son is in hospital? Shouldn't I be like, everybody's expecting me to feel sad and, oh, we're so sorry this happened to you. But I'm okay. I'm more than okay. I actually feel really joyful. I'm so grateful he's alive. The hospital people are nice. I noticed there were quite a few needs of mine met, like it was very sociable. I had a continuum of people who cared. In hospital, I see the same people every day. So there's a continuum. It was such lovely things. It was always warm in the neonatal unit. I'm a freeze ball. I got to sit with my boobs out all day, which I really enjoyed, to be honest. So there were quite a few things that I actually really liked. And I had all the time in the world to be present with my child.
Yeah.
Thriving is independent of your situation.
And I think there's a lot to be said about what you just mentioned about this presence, because so many people are not present in their own life. They're not even spectators sometimes. They're just like, quite literally, the hamster in the little wheel.
Interesting, isn't it? That's a whole big spiritual conversation of what is your life, what is presence, and what's the key to everything. And the key to everything is that you're able to actually live in your body and in your life. Because without that, what have you got?
And I think sometimes, so I rang some family members to organise Christmas. And one of the questions was, what do you want for Christmas? And one of my aunties mentioned that a couple of years back, I bought whatever for her sister. Could she have something similar? And I went, oh, bear with, because my cat always buys me Christmas presents. It's just very nice like that. And I said, funny enough, my cat has bought me a really nice vase that I think you'd like. Let me just unwrap it and show you. So I showed it to her and she was like, oh, yeah, please. So I was like, there was only one left last time I went in the shop. So you had to just nip to the shop quick. And you then joined the queue. I went at 11 o'clock in the morning. You would think the entire town went to that shop today at 11 o'clock in the morning. You couldn't park, for starters, and then they're all in the queue. Everybody's looking rather grumpy and all the rest of it. And there was that one cashier, which I ended up with, so I was quite happy with that, asking everybody how they are. And I was like, oh, I'm okay, thanks. How are you? Oh, thank you for asking. People don't normally ask me. She was very present. And, you know, she asked me, was I working today? And did I have any plans? And, you know, whilst doing, she wasn't just taking time for the sake of taking time. She was just genuinely putting her attention on me, the customer, and being genuinely interested. It left me with a nice feeling really for the rest of the day, and I kind of hope that I did the same, because I returned the questions back to her. It wasn't all about me. But I think that in what you've just said, you know, this example really popped up, because I think a lot of people, you know, go shop, take the thing, pay, run to next place, and there's no actual enjoyment of just the process of buying of ours.
Amazing. I love this story. So we're talking about what is presence, and you're pointing to presence is to put your attention on what is and on who is in front of you, and it's this interaction. Like presence is an interaction with life.
Yeah, even if it's by yourself.
Exactly. So you can ask yourself, am I interacting with life right now, or is life happening? It's just life. You know how people say, oh, I can't wait to get through this day. I can't wait to get through this. I can't wait to be done with this. I can't wait. That's life happening to you versus you interacting with life.
As you were saying, it reminded me of a particular story. So this is a guy I worked with a few years back. We both left at different. I left before him, but I left without a job to go to because I just wanted to go. And he left to a competitor, and then through competitor decided that he wanted me to go and join them. So I ended up going there, and we ended up working together again. And there was one particular point where I remember him saying he was leaving. He decided he was going to, can't quite remember. It was kind of self-employed, but not quite. It was a new venture. And, I can't wait for such a date. And funny enough, I remember the date, and it's over 10 years ago. And he was literally counting the days until that day, which was going to be his last day, and when he was going to start and everything else. And that day, its stepfather died. And I always remember how the bittersweetness of it, how it kind of like wished these 3 weeks away, not knowing what was about to happen, but also kind of like regretting and realizing that I'd wished time away, if you know what I mean.
Interesting, isn't it?
So it's in so many different ways, isn't it? As you say, it's about a lot of the time, I think, I mean, I'm guilty of it as well. We do let life live us more than the other way around.
Yeah. And it's not wrong, but it's more fun when you get to live with life.
Yeah.
And there's different stages, actually. So there's life happening to me. And then there is I interact with life. And then there's the stage of I make life happen. This is the empowerment phase. And then there is the surrendered phase of life is happening through me.
Yeah.
And then in the more elevated consciousness, life is me. And that's a different chapter. So I think where we operate and want to operate is shifting people from life is happening to me to I make things happen.
Yeah.
It's in those aspects that we're swimming and get to play.
And I think the thing as well, one of the things I often say to people is, whilst I do agree about certain elements of the law of attraction, my dad was a good example. He was petrified of leaks. I don't know anybody else that has had 11 leaks in 3 years in the house. Even when it wasn't his own leak, he would leak into his house. When we bought a new house, he was really reassured the entire water system had been redone. But guess what? He leaked in the foundation. We had to redo it again. But he was so focused on leaks. Leaks were following him around. But the way I look at it is also, if you're very negative, you're going to, a very positive person is not going to want to spend too much time with you. Yet, like the law of physics, life is like a wheel. It goes down, but when he hits that, he needs to go back up. And he will go back down again, but he will go back up again. It's one of those. You without the bad, you can't understand the good. And either way, the other way around.
There is that, right? So we need the contrast to have the experience.
Yeah. So we kind of completely running out of time. So what would be your parting words, pearl of wisdom, something you would like to leave us with?
So I really love to see people in pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
I really love when I see that someone can shift their view and their feeling from this strained way into this flow and pleasurable way of being, and really experience the miracle and the beauty and the aliveness that is available to all of us. Maybe it's helpful to think about where you are at the moment. So if you're in a difficult situation, are you feeling that it's happening to you? Right? Probably. And on one level, it is. When we see it that way, it is, right? It was happening to me. My son was born this way, and there was all this. That did happen to me on that level. But I don't need to be at home in that. Then you can think, well, if I create life, if I make life happen, like what is my vision? What would I love to see in this scenario? Even if it's impossible, but what would I love to see? And is there a way that I can hold on to that vision? This woman that I've listened to on this podcast held on to her completely impossible vision of having a son alive and well and thriving, who is, by the way, going to a mainstream school, now a secondary school, Oh, amazing.
But I think one of the issues is that we always, the brain wants to logically understand the how. And when we can't logically understand the how, that's when it becomes impossible. If we remove the how, if we just say what you just said, wouldn't it be nice if I could breastfeed? And stop the how and stop trying to fill in the gaps and the steps and the stuff is when it's more possible.
I like that. So cancel the how or park the how for a little bit and just go into, wouldn't it be nice if though?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be nice if though? So that's what we call possibility thinking. There's something about not attaching too much of it if we can. And trust me, I understand if you can't, because I get very attached to my visions at times. Anyway, if we park the how, we go into possibility thinking. That's a lovely thing. If you want to know how to do this, is you must understand the limitations of your mind.
Yes.
You must understand the limitations of your mind. The voice in your head is not God. It just thinks it is.
Yeah.
Like we think that we can think ourselves out of our problems. And the real solution becomes in this thinking becoming less, slower, and having space. And you do that, you create that space by going into your body, touch your body. squeeze your body, do sport, get into your body, get out of your mind. All this talking and thinking is not necessarily helping you.
Right, Evelyne, thank you so much. Really enjoyed talking to you. And for everybody else, if you enjoyed the show, then please subscribe, leave us a review, or more importantly, come back for the next episode. Thank you.